Good morning, everyone. Um, we are going to start our food science unit. So, you guys got a little lucky here with everything that happened. We're no longer going to do a joint unit with facts, but we are going to focus on food science and how it involves or how it entails agriculture and the role that agricultural plays in our food science industry. So, you guys won't have to cook anything or anything like that, but we are just going to go through some of the things because in reality, agriculture is food science. That's a whole section of what our industry really is. So we're going to go ahead and go through that. So I have a PowerPoint here. I'm just going to talk through it for you guys. Please watch this. I'll also probably put up just the blank PowerPoint if you'd like to read through it. So food science. I've asked you guys a question on Yammer, and I'd like you to answer, what is food science? What does food science mean to you? This is going to be your first assignment. You probably should have already done this even, but I want you guys to just think about what food science means and what it entails. So before we look at food science, what it is now, let's talk maybe about the past. So let's go all the way back to 1790. At that time, the total population was 3,929,214. That's a pretty drastic difference from what our population is now, where we're closing in on 8 billion people. But at that time, 90% of the workforce was made up by farmers. So that means almost all of you guys would have been farmers at that time. Now we know that hardly any of us are necessarily farmers. We might work in the agricultural industry, and some of us still are farmers, but not 90% of us. So back then, everybody had to be a farmer. They took care of themselves. So they had their garden, they had their fields, they had probably had some chickens that they would butcher for their meat, and then they'd have their field of corn or potatoes or whatever it might be, and that's how they kind of survived off the year. They might have traded with their neighbors, so maybe one neighbor had a field of corn while the other had a field of potatoes, so maybe they trade some potatoes for corn. But that's really how they lived. They had to provide for themselves. They lived off the land. But now in the U.S., this is just the U.S., we are at 325.7 million people. 2.1 million farms dot America's rural landscape. However, that's not necessarily that seems like a lot compared to how many there are, but really some of those farms aren't necessarily as big, okay? So just keep that in mind. But 2.1 million farms dot America's rural landscape. About 99% of U.S. farms are operated by families, individual family partnerships, or family corporations. So around here, we pretty much only see family farms. We don't necessarily see any corporations that come in and own everything from point A to point B. So we see a lot of those family farms, and that's a good thing, right? Like, it's good to see that family farms are still there because that's how a lot of people make their living. Approximately one U.S. farm feeds 165 people annually in the U.S. and abroad. So if you think about some of you guys that are farmers, you're feeding 165 people. That's pretty crazy to think about. That one farm can feed 165 people all year round. But when you look at what our operations are, farm and ranch families comprise just 2% of the U.S. population. That's a pretty drastic change from the 90% a couple thousand or 2,000 years ago, okay? So just 2% of the U.S. population is farm and ranch families. And about 25% of the U.S. farm products by value are exported each year. So exported means they're sent outside of our country. So maybe we're sending them over to Europe, India, China, anything like that. I want to go back just for a second to the farm and ranch families comprise just 2% of the U.S. population. If you think about that, that's why ag education is so important. We're all so distantly removed from the family farm that we don't necessarily know where our food comes from. When people think that chocolate milk comes from brown cows, not a thing. And it's because they just don't have that real world experience. So I feel like it's very important for my job to help you guys understand kind of a little bit about where your food comes from, because we know that in this class, it's not just farmers and ranchers. We have people from all sorts of backgrounds. And so it's really important that that I share with you guys some of the facts about agriculture and to help you guys understand. And then your role is to go out and share that with other people. So maybe you see somebody in the grocery store and they have a question about what the difference between organic and non-organic might be. You'd be able to explain that to them. Okay, that's huge. So, how did we get to where we are today? Why can only 2% of our population be farmers and ranchers compared to when we needed 90% of our people to be farmers and ranchers? Okay, so we've made a lot of advancements over the years, right? We have advancements in machineries. We're no longer using a horse and buggy or a mule and oxen, or out there with our own hoe digging each furrow for our crops to be seeded in. Now we have tractors that practically can drive themselves. We have GPS, so we're increased accuracy, which kind of gets into our technology section, right? We have made so many advances in technology that we know so much more. We know where, or like how to utilize things. We know, like, we just have more information on everything. And then our information in general. Genetics of our livestock, genetics of our corn or soybean seeds, anything like that. We're now making seeds that are resistant to certain insects or resistant to fungicides, okay? Or maybe resistant to chemicals. Maybe they're more drought tolerant. We're utilizing those genetics in order to increase our yield, which lets us feed more people on less amount, okay? Soil health. We know more about the soil. We know how to care for our soil. We know that if soil is in better health, that they'll be able to produce more. And we know what they need more. Like, we've just spent more time researching and finding information, utilizing our technology and our machinery to figure out what that crop needs to grow. How can we get the higher yield? So do we apply more fertilizer? Is it lacking in nitrogen? If we give it more nitrogen, will that increase the yield? All of those things are just huge when it comes to how we got to where we were today. We can, especially if you think about our machinery, like, we can cover a pretty good chunk of acres in a day, right? You know, if we were harvesting 100 acres, we could probably do that in a day. But if you think back, like way back, would have they been able to harvest acres in a day? Oh my gosh, that would have taken them weeks, okay? Or a ton of people. So it's just kind of how things have changed. Feeding the world. So this is just kind of how you can see the change, especially in the last 100 years, how our population has increased so drastically. I mean, even if you look at 60 years ago, we were half the size. The population was half of what it is today. Half. That's insane. And so now we have to come up with a way to feed the world. Because are we getting any more land? Absolutely not. We still have the same amount of land that we had before, except now we're expected to feed all these more people. So how do we do that? How do we feed more people on the same amount of land? And actually, really, we're thinking we're feeding less people on that amount of land. Less. Or we're feeding more people with less land. Because those people have to have a place to live too. So where are they living? They're taking up some of our land that used to be able to be for production to live on. So we're now feeding them more. We're feeding more people on even less acres. Crazy to think about. So how are we going to feed the world? How can we make sure that by 2050, when we have close to when we get to 9 billion people, how are we going to feed them? I just want you guys to think about this. If you have any really good ideas, please feel free to share it on the Yammer page. Excuse me. So let's just talk about what food science is, okay? So this is a field involving chemistry, biochemistry, nutrition, microbiology, and engineering to give one the scientific knowledge to solve real-world problems in the food system, okay? So food science isn't just cooking. Food science might be looking at the food chemistry, so analyzing what food is made up of, raw materials, its ingredients. Maybe it's looking at the processing, okay? So how can we process these foods and make it into a consumer-friendly product? Functional plant foods for a healthy diet. Right now, the huge thing is plant-based protein, okay? Trying to find alternatives to some of our food sources in order to be able to feed more people. Nutrition, bioavailability, and health, okay? We're looking at nutrients and foods. What does the human body need? We know so well what to feed our livestock. We can have their ration down to a T. But do we necessarily know how to feed ourselves? Do we feed ourselves the best? No, not always. So kind of looking at some of those things. How can we take better care of ourselves? Nutrition policies and sustainability. Okay, how do we supplement our dietary recommendations? Are we eating well for our health and environment? All of these things kind of come into food science. And this isn't even just all of it, okay? Because this is kind of like more on the processing side of it. But even if you think about, okay, food production, how do we produce food? So looking at the chemistry of it. So food science actually entails a lot and is actually a very complex and important industry that maybe we don't necessarily hear about. You can actually go to college to get a degree in food science. So if you're interested in science and maybe your health and how to create products, you could do that. One of my good friends works as a food scientist for Chobani out in Idaho. And her main job is to come up with different forms or different like flavors of yogurt or ice cream. So she has a pretty cool job and she gets to like taste test, but she has to know and understand some of the microbiology and biochemistry behind this stuff. And it's really pretty neat. So why is food science important? Why do we care what this food science is? You and I, we go to the grocery store, we get our food, we eat it, tastes good. Heck, we're on our merry way. We don't even think about some of those things. But food safety and food security are two huge issues. Especially around here, I think sometimes we forget how blessed we are for food security. I mean, most of us, and if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, and you are not necessarily this way, or if you need anything, you can always come to me. But for the most part, we all know where our next meal is going to come from. And that is such a blessing for all of us, really, to be able to say, hey, I know where my food's coming from. All right, so food chemistry. This is the study of substances in which food is made. So elements combine to form compounds. So like table salt, which is actually sodium chloride, is actually a simple compound. Sucrose, which is sugar, on the other hand, is a more complex compound. Carbon, 12, hydrogen, 22, oxygen, 11. You guys haven't quite gotten to your chemistry section yet of high school, but when you get there, like you'll start to learn like all these elements make up our food components. So that plays a huge role in looking at what our food is made of. So, major compounds that make up food. We know that there are pretty much 6 major things in our diets. So, and that pretty much is what all food is made up of. So water is 1. Lipids is 2. Another word for lipids is fat, so that's all our fats. 3 is proteins. 4, carbohydrates. 5, vitamins. 6, minerals. And then the 7th one, which doesn't have a huge, like it's not a huge component of our food system, especially if we're eating really true and fresh foods. But if we're eating more processed things, then we have more food additives in there. So colors, thickeners, preservatives. So anything that you buy from the store, especially if you think of like maybe a TV dinner, they have preservatives in it, right? Maybe they have something to enhance the color of meat because we know that the color of meat changes when it's exposed to oxygen. So maybe they have something in there to preserve color in it. So these are kind of what all of our foods are made up of. So food physics is another aspect of food science. Study of food ingredient interactions with kinetic energy. Kinetic energy, another science term you probably haven't heard yet, heat. So foods are heated, what happens to it? When foods are cooled, what happens to it? Does it change forms? Does it change properties? Does it lose nutritional value? Things along those lines. So they're looking at some of the food physics of this. So it's like we haven't even got to all of it yet, but you can start to see that there is a huge, or a large variety of what food science means and different routes you could go into if you chose to go into food science. And so we're just kind of doing an overview of all of the different areas of food science today. Food microbiology. This is the study of microorganisms and their effect on food. So we can have undesirable microorganisms, so molds, yeasts, bacteria, viruses, things that cause spoilage, or we can have useful microorganisms. So like when we use yeast to make bread, bacteria in cheese. We know that cheese is kind of moldy or gets moldy, and that's actually how we make cheese, right? And so looking at how the microbiology of this has an effect. Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it going to harm the humans that consume it? Trying to look at all of those areas. So, food production pathways. This is what we were probably going to more so focus on when we got to our joint unit, but we will look at this a little bit here now. So, does anybody have any idea what food production pathways might be? If you do, you can throw it up on Yammer. So, food production pathways. There are 4 segments: production, processing, distribution, and marketing. I want you guys to just take a moment and think to yourself, what do I know about these words already, and how would that tie into a food production pathway? Okay, so think about production. What does production mean to me? If I related it to the food industry, what would food production pathway be? Same with processing, same with distribution, and then marketing. All right, so agricultural production. This is what we know as farming. So it's the producing of crops and raising animals. So using land and other resources to grow and raise animals. So this could be all of the segments that go into farming. So purchasing machinery, purchasing your seed, purchasing your chemical fertilizer, going ahead and planting, and then maybe applying a chemical application to control weeds or insects. Then going ahead and harvesting. Then of course, it doesn't just, once we harvest it, we still have to sell it. So selling our product so that it can change into something else. All of this is known as the farming, and this is our production. We're producing those products, those crops and animals that we're going to further down the road change into a valuable resource that consumers can utilize. So, edible food products. What comes from things, okay? So livestock, any material derived from the body of an animal, okay? So our edible food products from livestock: ground meat, ground beef, ground turkey, chicken breasts, steaks, pork chops, any of those things would be our edible food products from livestock. Crops. This is a plant grown for its products, which can be both edible and non-edible. Do we use crops just for food? No, we use it for fiber and fuel as well. So in the food science, we're looking at the edible side of it, but there's a huge industry in the non-edible side too, especially like in corn. If you think about ethanol or some of the fibers that you can get from different things. The hemp industry has a lot of new resources because they use hemp in lotions, different things like that as well. The other thing about, I don't know what else I was going to say there. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Fruit. This is the edible ripened ovary of a tree, shrub, or vine. So like if you think about a grape, this is like the ripened ovary is the part that you eat. Vegetables are a herbaceous plant that has edible parts to it as well. Oh, the other thing I was going to say about crops is that they can also go to livestock feed, which can then we can utilize the livestock feed. So let's look at livestock products. In this picture, there's a huge variety of livestock products. You have beef, pork, chicken, lamb, milk, dairy products, along with all of your meat cuts. Okay, so there's sausage, roast, steaks, pork chops, lamb chops, ham, bacon, turkey, chicken breast. The list goes on and on of the livestock products. Crops. We can change our crops into a lot of different things. So when we harvest wheat, we turn it into flour maybe, or a different material, like we use wheat for flour a lot. Then we can use it to make pasta or bread or a ton of other things. Canola, we utilize oil a lot, so canola oil. Cornmeal, we can also make like a corn flour. Edible beans. Edible beans are like your navy beans, pinto beans that we just eat straight like they are. Soy products. Soybeans like have a huge industry now with soy-based products. You can have soybean oil or like soy oil. There's soy chips, soy whatever you can think of pretty much. Mustard is a seasoning. So all of our seasonings that you use started out as a crop once. And then, of course, livestock feed as well. Fruit. This is the ripened ovary of a tree, vine, or shrub. So your examples, some or just like a couple examples would be apples, oranges, bananas, pomegranate, cantaloupe, watermelon, pineapple, bananas, pears. Like you can see from the picture, the list goes on and on. There are a ton of fruits and vegetables out there that we can eat. Vegetables. Lettuce, carrots, cucumbers, asparagus, radish, celery, peas. I'm sure you can think of many more. Brussels sprouts, peppers, garlic, celery. Oh, I have celery on the list. But the list goes on and on. Think about like what you're planting in your garden. So there's a lot of edible foods we can use. So what does production agricultural look like? It might look different in different areas of the world. Around here, we have a lot of corn and soybeans, wheat products. But in other areas, like in California, maybe it's more vineyards and orchards, which would be like an apple orchard, citrus orchard. Florida is known for its citrus fruits, so oranges, grapefruit, things like that. New Mexico and Nevada, like the lower portion of them, they have a lot of vegetable places, okay? So raising lettuce, carrots, something like that. Could be in Nebraska, Texas, where there's a ton of feedlots. Up here, we have Qual Dairy. Wisconsin has a lot of dairies as well. So production agriculture looks different across the U.S., but it still has the same main goal in it. All right, so harvested food. When food is harvested, it is assessed. So it's typically given a quality and a yield grade. So for example, like if you go to the grocery store, you can pick out a prime steak, okay? It might be graded prime, or maybe it'd be certified Angus beef, that's choice, okay? U.S. standard grades provide the industry with a uniform language for describing the quality and condition of commodities. So another example would be like large grade A eggs. You can get different categories of eggs, which like are different sizes. Maybe they have a different kind of yolk, things like that as well. Food distribution is another process, or one of our pathways, okay? So this is all the activities associated with the transport of food products to where they can be used, okay? So this would be like your Walmart truck bringing food into your local Walmart, or Great Value maybe distributing their food products across the U.S. How it's transported, okay? So it could be a truck, it could be a semi, it could be on a boat, like a huge ship. Maybe it's over rail. There's a lot of different ways food is transported. Maybe it's even just a car, so it could be the car from the grocery store to yourself, okay? Food is transported in a few different ways. Food marketing. So the activities that create, communicate, deliver, and exchange products and services of value for customers, okay? So this is like involves some of the research. So research in this term would mean more so like, oh, people up in this part of the state eat a lot of meat and potatoes, or vegetables are a huge portion up here, so we should supply more vegetables. Advertising, making it known the value of this product. So like, there's a lot of campaigns out there for beef, like beef has the 10 big vitamins and minerals that you should, like, those are the reasons you should use it. Soy products, especially now, advertising has gotten huge. Like, what are the benefits of soy products? Why should you eat these? Where can you get them? Trying to make consumers aware of that. Even if you think of like other things, so advertising would be partly like GMOs, organic. Why are people promoting or dispromoting those products? Distribution. So where is they going to get sold at? Is it going to be sold at a local farmer's market? Is it going to be sold at your grocery store? Or is it going to be sold at like a chain, more of a chain type thing? Or is it going to go into restaurants? How is that food product going to be distributed? And then the sales from that product. How much money are they making? How many things are sold? All of these things are things to think about as far as that goes. All right. So, do you guys have any questions on what we covered so far? Okay, I will have a form that you guys will need to complete for today that goes along with this PowerPoint, and it'll be up on Yammer. If you guys have questions about any of this stuff, start a discussion post on Yammer. You might not be the only one that has that question, so it'd be good for other people to have that, or to get that other question answered as well. Your assignment for tomorrow is I'm going to put a video up there, and you need to watch, actually I think it'll be 2 videos. You need to watch what the future of egg looks like, and then I want you to start a discussion post. I'll start it. I'll start a question, and then you guys need to respond to the question on Yammer, as well as reply to somebody else's discussion. So like, I'll start it and say, I don't know, I'll maybe just start with a general question. Be like, what did you think about the video? What did you find interesting about the future of agriculture, or what did you learn? And then you can reply. So maybe Cody's the first one to reply. And so she'll just underneath there hit reply, and she can start a discussion sharing her thoughts on that. So then maybe after Cody replies, maybe Grant's going to reply and put his own post. I thought this, but he also might read Cody's and say, oh, I agree with Cody. There was some really good points in there about that. It made me think about X, Y, and Z. Okay, so you need to make your own post. Like, so you need to reply to mine, and then you need to reply to somebody else's on there. Okay, so it should all be under one thread. So I'll start the main question. You guys can reply to that with your own individual statements, and then what you replied, or what somebody else replied, you need to comment on that, and you can reply to that as well. Okay. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. Please email me. I will get back to you ASAP, or you can also just post it on Yammer, and I'll get that on there as well. Okay. If you have questions about what this week is going to look like, please do not hesitate to ask. Otherwise, go ahead and move forward, and hope you guys have a great day.